We're back on the line with Ted Nugent. Ted gave us the first part of this interview, Brian, was absolutely amazing. One thing that, I mean, what did you think about, I mean, completely off the cuff, he pulls a letter out of, I mean, he's sitting there laid up in a hospital bed, just had knees replaced, and he pulls out a letter from a Vietnam vet. I mean, I know we're talking about deer hunting, but a lot of this goes straight to that point, doesn't it?
Well, as he said several times and so articulately, I mean, that's why we were able to enjoy the freedoms we have when it comes to deer hunting or firearms ownership or anything, because of the folks who have fought for our freedom, and Ted in turn is, you know, trying to make sure those folks get their just due, I guess, in this country.
It's really powerful stuff. Like I said, I don't know another way to describe it. One thing I want to bring this back. I mean, I would love to be the CNN of this deer world, and maybe we are, but I think we aspire to be just more deer focused. But one of the things I want to bring up is a fellow blogger of Ted's at deeranddeerhunting.com, Nicole McLean. We've been following Nicole for quite a long time. We featured her in the I'm a Deer Hunter column. I call her the girl Nugent she's about half Ted's age, but I mean she is very outspoken, very good positive force, not only in the hunting world, but she comes from that whole modeling and acting side of the country. But she channeled great white buffalo this week in North Dakota, 45 below. She shot a free-ranging bison with a crossbow. How cool is that?
I saw that. Yeah,
that's my girl. That's my queen of the forest. You know, Shemaine and Nicole have communicated. We're trying to get them together for some Queen of the Forest segments. But you're absolutely right about that, Dan. It's not bad to have someone really knowledgeable and someone brave enough to stand up on these politically incorrect issues. But when they're that experienced and that forthright, not to mention that beautiful to look at, it really is an asset to the force of conservation in the deer hunting lifestyle. So God bless her, huh?
Just like that. We have Ted Nugent on the line. Thank you, Ted. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of Deer Talk. We're going to get back to some more questions, because what I think is cool is we open this up. We open this up to anybody, and I said, I don't care who you are and what you believe. You don't have to be a fan of Ted Nugent, of not only his music or his hunting work or his political views. Ask us your questions, bring them on, and he's going to answer them, and he's been as gracious to do that. Brian, you're going to shoot the first one out in this segment.
Yeah, absolutely. Ted, this comes from Ryan Welch, and he asks, if you were to arm hunters with the top 3 justifications or counterpoints in 30 seconds or less to the anti's arguments whenever we encounter them on the street, what would your personal favorites be?
Well, there's so many undeniable elements on our side for sustained yield, renewable resource management. I've confronted these people since the early 1960s, and I try not to do it in a mean-spirited way. In fact, I've got it under such a loving way that I think the number one important delivery to a non-hunter or an anti-hunter is to remain civil, remain friendly, remain upbeat, and always keep a smile on your face. And just get a wide-eyed, bushy-tailed look on your face and say, hey, deer hunting's perfect. My family eats venison along with another 100 million Americans, and we share over 250 billion perfect, nutritious meals of venison with soup kitchens and homeless shelters every year through Hunters for the Hungry program. And anywhere that they've banned or compromised the deer hunting right for harvesting the annual surplus, our tax dollars are used to hire sharpshooters to fix the overpopulated deer that are a result of banning or compromising the natural season of harvest. So if you do it in such a delivery where you identify how perfect it is, how wonderful and nutritious and renewable venison is, I think they start to grasp that a little bit better. I'm hoping you guys saw me on That Metal show recently. So I delve into the arenas and the territories that are typically construed as the most anti-hunting and anti-gun environment you could ever dream of. And I always win because the facts are so obvious that when I reiterate them and articulate them, I win over more people every time than I lose. I promise you that. We've got the evidence to prove that.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because you and I talk about this a lot, and it seems to me on a weekly basis. But and you actually gave me the idea this fall in Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. You're going to be able to pick up this magazine. We're going to have not only Ted's views on it, but I've asked every member of our field staff, our pro staffers, our regular contributors to tackle one segment of the deer hunting environment that we call dumb deer laws, dumb deer regulations. And this goes all the way from antler, well, I shouldn't say antler restrictions, but some people believe that, baiting, lighted nocks, restrictions on bows, restrictions on guns. Let's talk about that for a second, because, I mean, we have to have regulations, but aren't some of these just way too over the top?
Oh, we've been so over-regulated for so long. Let's identify something that's not even deer hunting regulations. It's waterfowl and migratory bird regulations. Back in the 1930s, there was a dust bowl. I'm sure most people are familiar with that, but there's a lot of Americans that were educated in the American education system that never heard of the dust bowl, that don't know that the movie Grapes of Wrath was about people leaving the Midwest because of failed farming practices that eliminated the topsoil with huge windstorms that came up and eliminated the prairie pothole breeding areas for waterfowl, almost wiping out the production of new waterfowl every year. So we went right from unrestricted market hunting into the depletion of increased waterfowl populations, and we had to ultimately restrict the waterfowl harvest. Okay, so far so good. Makes perfect sense. Reduce production, reduce the harvest, so you don't interfere with the nucleus breeding of wildlife resources, ducks and geese primarily. So we restricted the times, the shooting hours, the bag limit, the length of the season, and we also implemented the 3-shot plug in pump shotguns. I don't think there was many automatics back then, but we had pump shotguns. In fact, there was a hue and cry, typical in the sporting industry and community, that people were calling the new Model 12 Winchester a machine gun because you could pump it so fast. And they thought that if you could pump 5 shells really quick, that you'd wipe out all the waterfowl, which is so ridiculous unto itself that that would take a whole other interview to complete. But ultimately, so we're talking 1930s, we're talking dust bowl, we're talking the elimination of the prairie pothole breeding areas for waterfowl. Here it is 2014, you still have the same restrictions. You have to have a plug in your shotgun. You can shoot 6 ducks, but you can only have 3 shells in the gun. You can shoot 15 doves, but you can only have 3 shells in your gun. You can only shoot 2 pheasants, but you can have 5 shells in your gun. It absolutely makes no sense at all. So there are so many truly illogical, bizarre, counterproductive regulations. So in Iowa, which has done a wonderful job of managing their incredible white-tailed deer herd, in Iowa you can bait deer until the opening day. And then once October 1 arrives, you can't bait anymore. Well, in Michigan, same region, same species, same considerations, you can't bait deer until opening day. How can a biologist or a scientifically educated game department look you in the eye and go, well, for these whitetail, it's better for them if we can bait only until opening day. But for these whitetail, you can't bait until opening day. I mean, or then some places where you can bait, but you can only use 2 gallons. Because Brian and Dan, I think we can all agree here at Deer and Deer Hunting, that if you bait with more than 2 gallons, the world will end, as we know. It is absolutely phenomenal. And then where they ban the baiting of deer, when there's an overpopulation of deer, the government gets to bait deer to bring the animals under control. You can't bait a bear in Colorado or California, but when the government takes our tax dollars to shoot the surplus bears because we haven't harvested enough, because we haven't been allowed to use bait, the government sharpshooters take our tax dollars to kill the surplus bears by using bait. You've got to be kidding me. So it's not just an inconvenience. It's not just really embarrassing. it's not just really foolish, it's actually ruining people's lives. I have documented cases where good young men doing what all parents hope their young sons will do are deer hunting out of state. They use the #1 broadhead on planet Earth, the #1 selling, the #1 admired, the #1 proven effective broadhead on planet Earth, the Rage broadhead. Because the Rage broadhead, the #1 selling broadhead in the world, is still illegal in a couple of states, they bring their legally taken deer, hunted properly during the archery season, hunted with the right licenses, the right tags, the right permits, everything is right. But they use the #1 broadhead in the world, and their families are bankrupted because they committed a felony Lacey Act violation by bringing an illegally harvested animal across state lines. The only law violated, they used the #1 broadhead in the world.
And that's what we
and
have.
This manages deer how?
That's what we have to bring to light, and that's why I'm asking the questions, is because these were regulations that were put in place by 1 or 2 individuals in a lot of cases that thought that a mechanical broadhead wasn't efficient, so therefore there's going to be a regulation on that. Do you think there should be a call for uniform regulations on hunting in America?
You know, I really do, because it's the same methodology, it's the same harvest science, whether it's moose or caribou or elk or deer. Once a methodology has been proven to be effective, fair, and desirable and successful in any region, then obviously it should be legal anywhere. Just like the free-show limit. I mean, if you can whack ducks in Mexico without a plug in your gun, and we have enough regulations to manage the science of sustained yield, why is that still the law? So, yes, I believe that our game department should have better communication. I don't believe that a person should end up with a fine in Michigan for kicking an apple closer to the tree he's in because he's hunting in an apple orchard, and it was before bait was legalized.
It makes complete sense.
It's phenomenal.
Along with this, I want to add one thing onto this. It's not completely related, but it's kind of related. There has been a war over the past, I'm going to say 10, 15 years or so. I think it's ramping up on just antler worship, antler restrictions. Now you see state mandated antler restrictions. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, you touched on it, Dan. There's only a handful of people that seem to go to these game commission hearings and influence the game departments, and they're monopolizing the issues. And I'm all for someone identifying a more desirable trophy stag than someone else. But you know me, I'm a backstrap guy, but because I get to hunt 300 days a year, and I get to hunt everywhere, and I hunt in places where there's virtually unlimited tags, with the MLD tags here in Michigan, Texas, and our doe permits in Michigan, I have unlimited deer licenses, so to speak. And so I've instituted my own antler restriction, but it's not antler restriction, it's age restriction. I don't want to shoot something under 3, though I'm still guilty of doing so because I get really excited and think back to the 1950s when I never had a shot. But I think it's a mistake to implement antler restrictions because in many cases, for example, here in Texas, in East Texas, the antlers must be 13 inches wide to be legal. Well, what if it's a 6-year-old buck with 10-inch wide antlers? And by the way, that's more often the case than otherwise. I believe that what is a trophy can only be determined by the man or woman behind the bow or the gun. And I think that we should communicate in our camps to teach each other and encourage each other to let younger deer walk. I believe that, you know, without those 1.5-year-old bucks, I don't think Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan would even have a deer season anymore. But I don't think it should be law. I think it should be something, an individual choice, and it should be encouraged. But if a guy wants to shoot a spike or a forkhorn on his one weekend of deer hunting, I think it's really wrong to tell that guy he can't do that.
Yep, outstanding points, Ted, outstanding. Changing gears here a little bit. This is part reader question and part me, but a reader asks, what will save the deer hunting tradition for our future generations? And along with that, I'd love to hear more about your Camp for Kids that you do every year.
Well, it really is one point in the same. It really is about the kids. I'm 65 years old right now, and I've been hunting all my life. And, you know, I got 9 wonderful children, 11 grandchildren. I've got all of them doing some kind of shooting and hunting and encourage them based on their own interest level. I try to fan the flame a little bit, but I don't push them. I think pushing them is actually more counterproductive than failing to introduce them. I believe that if we share our enthusiasm with not just our children, but encourage them to bring their neighbors over and their neighbors' parents, and you know, the kids at school, make sure their parents are involved. But we're going to have to make some sacrifices on that Saturday or Sunday where we just want to go hunting or we want to take a little time off and shut down from a hard week of work. I believe we've got to sacrifice a little bit and reach out. And that's why I started the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids in 1989. Fred Bear's last instructions to me in October of 1988 were to ignore my critics, to continue to enthusiastically promote and celebrate the mystical flight of the arrow and the beauty of sneaking up on a deer and back straps and all the different unique vernacular that I brought to my writing style and my speaking style and just my overall uppityness, excitability for my deer hunting, where people in the industry were just condemning me for this stuff. They would condemn me for saying whack 'em and stack 'em, when the vast majority of people thought that that was just a cute euphemism for harvest and butcher or whatever you want to implement there. Semantics should never be a consideration. But unfortunately, with political correctness came this knee-jerk condemnation of anything out of the ordinary and beyond the status quo old guard. So the number one way is what we've succeeded at Ted Nugent Camp for Kids and all the different state hunting organizations, Dan. All 50 states have wonderful mentorship programs. The Iowa bow hunters and the Colorado bow hunters and the Nebraska bow hunters and the South Dakota bow hunters and the Michigan bow hunters and the Lone Star bow hunters. Every organization now is involved in various ways with different charities like our Ted Nugent Camp for Kids. And it's about getting those lightweight bows in a safe environment with a close-range target that will stop an arrow and actually allow the arrow to stick, because it's getting the arrow to stick that really encourages kids. Or the new target that you can see that 22 bullet hit at 20 feet, so you know exactly where you have to adjust your point of aim. So there's a lot of upgrade taking place. So I salute everybody who dedicates and sacrifices so much time to mentor these young people. But we need to turn up the heat. We need to do more. More is better. So get involved with the kids organization. We have the Ted Nugent Camp for Kids. The success is clearly a result of the generous volunteers, Ward Parker and Paul Malone and Kevin March and Bruce Cull, the National Field Archery Association, and Carol at the Colorado Bow Hunters. So many wonderful, wonderful people. But you see it up there in Wisconsin and Illinois and Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas. It's happening all across this country. But everybody listening right now to Deer Talk, research it, turn up the heat, get involved, and get this archery in schools with the Matthews Archery and the Genesis Archery. Let's kick it up a notch and really increase the participation, because if you take your kid hunting, you won't have to hunt for your kid.
You've been saying that for 25 years or more, and that's...
At least 25, yeah.
Actually, probably more than that, because I'm going to bring something up that we've talked about, but Kristen Schmidt is she is the daughter-in-law of a very dear friend of yours who you hunted with as a kid. And Kristen's got a new blog starting right next to yours on deeranddeerhunting.com. Let's talk about just maybe one or two of your experiences with Mark when you were a kid.
Well, let me tell you, boy, I'd like to do more Deer Talk, because, you know, everybody around me said, no, Ted, you shouldn't do any interviews right now. You just had knee surgery. I said, but talking about deer hunting is remedial. Talking with Deer Talk with Dan and Brian, with all my deeranddeerhunting.com blood brothers, this is actually going to take away the pain. And I got to tell you, right now, like I said, I have these two big ice sacks on my knees that my legs and knees are so swollen right now. It's really adorable. But I got to tell you, talking about deer hunting, there is no pain. I swear to God. And you talking about those early years in Detroit. I was born in 1948, and I promise you I had some kind of projectile flinging weapon in my hand that first year. I was on my dad's back, the way they tell me, in 1949, up in the Ogumwa State Forest in northern Michigan, for my first deer season in October of 1949. Now, I wasn't quite 1 year old yet, but I think that qualifies as being in deer camp, you know what I mean? And my cousin Mark Schmidt was the son of Dick and Emily Schmidt, and Emily was my dad's sister. And we all were hunting families, all my brothers and sisters and all my cousins. We all loved the outdoors, and we were Davy Red Ryder BB gun fanatics. And we got our first little single-shot Remington and Winchester bolt-action 22s to hunt woodchucks in Pennsylvania at the old Ginkgo farm over by Freiburg with our extended family there. So Mark Schmidt and I were the scourge of the Dearborn Hills golf course, where if you were a skunk or a raccoon or a fox squirrel or a red squirrel or a woodchuck, you didn't have a prayer against Ted Nugent and Mark Schmidt with our little Osage orange longbows and our M3 and M2 and old Bodkin broadheads and the original Bear Razorhead and Jack Zawicki's Delta. I mean, I was there when Fred Bear was first reinvigorating this wonderful close-range challenge of bow hunting. So I've been doing my whole life, and Mark and I still keep in touch. And I keep in touch with a lot of my buddies from way back when I was a little boy hunting the Rouge River for skunks and squirrels and river rats and possums and just everything that we could find an arrow into. I think at one point I killed more squirrels with the bow and arrow than any living human being ever has. And my mom and dad would force me, train me, parent me to utilize these resources. I used to shoot bobwhite quail with blunts that we'd use a 38 special cartridge on the end of Osage Port Orford cedar arrow that we got up at Miller's Speed Store in Grand River in 1950, 1952, 1953, and we would shoot quail down along the Rouge River, right in Detroit. And my dad would teach me how to clean them and cook them, and that's a powerful, powerful, positive force into bringing me the quality of life that I'm sharing with you right now and being a part of deer and deer hunting. That's really what makes my motor run.
Awesome. I don't even know how to top that. Well, we're gonna let you get back to some recuperation. I'm gonna just a couple shout outs here. Amy Reed wants to know if you will marry her and her fiance this fall in their backyard. I don't know if you're
Boy, I could perform quite the memorable ceremony, could I not?
I think
Absolutely.
you probably could. I don't know if you're a licensed preacher or anything like that, but
well, actually, Shemaine's got a. What kind of license you got? You can perform a marriage ceremony. Hang on there, Dad. She's a registered minister, so yes, if Shemaine and my schedule could possibly be manipulated, Shemaine would be happy to perform a marriage ceremony. But again, that's a huge if. We're awfully busy right now.
wow, I'm making a note of that. You're going to see some traction on that here on Facebook in about 20 minutes. Brian, you got to have one follow-up question here.
Well, we do have a couple of fun questions that came across for Ted. Matt Patrick wants to know, Ted, if he can drive your Bronco.
You know, right now I can't drive anything, and he certainly cannot drive my Bronco. I've got a bunch of Ford Broncos because I was always such a big fan of Bill Stropp's original Ford Bronco from 1966, and I've had the unbelievable honor of being trained to race off-road by Bill Stropp and Parnelli Jones and Mickey Thompson. So I have an original 1966 half-cab Ford Bronco that Jeff Bronco Graveyard and Butler Body Shop and BuildABronco.com put together for me back in Michigan. That is just the coolest truck in the world. I have a 1974 bobtail Ford Bronco that Jeff Bronco Graveyard and Summit Racing and my buddies, we all put up some wrench time into it. And I've got that unbelievable Ford Bronco, the big zebra one. So I got 3 Broncos right now. And as soon as I get my legs working, I'm going to go try to destroy them.
Wow. Well, we're gonna let you get those knees healed up. Ted, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's been, as always, just a wonderful pleasure to have you on.
Well, thanks, guys. God bless deer and deer hunting. God bless deer and deer hunters. God bless everybody out there. Let's turn up the heat. Let's join the National Rifle Association. Remember that freedom is not free. Get a hold of OperationFinallyHome.org. OperationFinallyHome.org. We'll take a $100 donation and turn it into $400. If you send us $1, we not only won't use any of it for administration, we'll take your $1 and turn it into $4 and build a home for a hero of the U.S. military that provided us with freedom.
Awesome. Well, you can learn more about that, tednugent.com, Ted Nugent on Facebook, Ted Nugent on Twitter, Ted Nugent everywhere. Thank you, Ted. I hope you not have as much pain and heal up really quick.
Well, God bless you guys. Let's do this again, and thanks everybody for your support, and have a wonderful, wonderful year. Turkey season is far off.
All right.
Excellent. Thanks, Ted.
Have a great day. Never a dull moment right there. I mean, just always on, like I said.
What's amazing is it's just off the top of his head. He's just, like you said, always on and so articulate, and just has so many great points. And I loved the stories he brought up about his youth. I mean, that's just insightful and incredibly entertaining.
And and that it goes to the point, because your question, was it not only about his camp for kids, but he does it in his home life. He's always been doing that. Is he volatile in things he says? Yes. I mean, the guy was a rock star. I mean, he was an international rock star. But he always comes down to those roots, which is really amazing that he's got such an incredible memory that he remembers all the details. The actual brand of that arrow, I was trying to jot that down. I was like, what kind of cedar arrow was it?
Yeah, the
he remembers
cedar
it.
shaft, yeah.
It was 60 years ago. I mean, it's incredible stuff.
Yeah, it is, And I think people, like he mentioned himself, I mean, some people, the old guard, maybe did criticize Ted when he first came upon the hunting scene, but we need people like Ted out there. I mean, I think so many of us are guilty of being shy or reserved about it, and there's nothing wrong with being humble or maybe being quiet, but we need people like Ted to get out there and really fight the battle at the forefront, in pop culture, where it's visible, not just in the gun clubs or the shooting ranges or the hunting camps that we frequent, but out there in the mainstream. That's where the battle is ultimately going to be lost and won, and Ted is the guy who's out there doing it.
He's out there in front of it, and the other thing, too, is we all are apathetic. I mean, we all are, because we kind of get lulled into this, he calls it the sheep mentality.
We get comfortable, I think, and it's easy for you and I guess, because we're in the outdoor media, so it's easy for us to sit back and say, well, we're preaching to the choir. And I think we forget, maybe it's just complacency more than anything. But I think we forget that message always needs to be broadcast out there, And I mean, even if we're just reaching one, non-hunter, or maybe convincing one anti-hunter, to take a look at the hunting lifestyle we hold so dear, it's well worth it, But above and beyond that, Ted, like we said, is out there doing it, preaching it to everyone all the time. And, we should all thank him for it.
We really should. And if you want to read more about it, we talked about it, we referenced it. Ted Nugent's blog at deeranddeerhunting.com. A newcomer here, Kristen Schmidt. It's called From City Roots to Hunting Boots. She's actually related through marriage to Ted. And that's not why we signed her up. We signed her up because she's incredibly articulate, and she's taking up bow hunting after 30 years of no hunting experience. And it's going to be cool. So you're going to follow the steps along the path, so to speak, of her becoming a bow hunter, that sustainable locavore aspect. We have Nicole McLean's blog on deeranddeerhunting.com. We have so much stuff there, so much great content for everybody. But again, just please resubscribe, get it digitally. Deer and Deer Hunting Magazine, $19 a year, 10 times a year. You get Ted Nugent's columns. You get all the great stuff from Charlie Alsheimer and John Ozoga and Phil Bishop and Reverend Zeke Pfeiffer. We have it all in this magazine. We're very proud to produce it, still be producing it since 1977. That's it for today. Check out our deals at shopdeerhunting.com. For next week, I'm Dan Schmidt along with Brian Lovett. Thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now.